Yeah, look,
So as of this is as of December 31, there's nothing pending for this year. Don't want to perjure myself.
Did you get the dates?
I know. Yeah, Cheryl and I went over all of this and we talked about all of the dates and made sure that we were correct on this. I'm not sure. I'm gonna send these back to the office and then we'll get started.
This whole packet was included in the in the packet too, so I just brought a copy just in case someone has like a page 45 question. Yeah. I got both electronically.
Let's see, Roger. And it's 6:31. Roger.
I'm not sure about that.
Okay, well, we should get started and hopefully Roger will join us.
Recording in progress.
Okay, good evening. It is Wednesday, February 26th. This is a regular meeting of the Norwich Selectboard. I'm Pam Smith, Chair. I'm joined here in the room by Mary Layton, Vice Chair, Priscilla Vincent, and Marcia Calloway, and our Town Manager, Brennan Duffy. So with that, we should get started. And the first item on our agenda is the agenda. I do have one request to add to the agenda. Brennan would like us to add at the end of our meeting a quick review of the agenda for the March 5 organizational meeting so that he can get that posted next Monday.
Oh,
So if we can add that as number 17, move adjournment to 18. Any other changes or questions? There's Roger. Okay, good. All right. Would someone like to make a motion?
I move to approve the agenda as amended to include number 17, discussion of an agenda for next week's organizational meeting.
All right, thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any comments, questions, discussion? Seeing none, Mary, how do you vote?
Oh, yes.
Priscilla?
Yes.
Marcia? No, it's the two. Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. 4 yes, 1 no. Okay, great. All right, the next item on the agenda is the chair's report. It's very brief. I attended the Lister meeting on February 13th for a presentation by KRT. I met with the manager to set the agenda for tonight, and we also had a conversation about some of the motions. And then tomorrow I will be attending another Lister meeting to receive the next KRT update. Okay.
And you will be joined at that meeting tomorrow by a couple others of us.
Yes, Priscilla and Mary have agreed to attend as well. Okay, number 3, public comments for items not on the agenda. Are there any public comments? Priscilla?
If I could just say, this is the last meeting with you, Pam, and with Roger. Hello, Green Hat. And I want to thank you both for the time you've given the town and for being such helpful colleagues. And I mean, you get a deserved rest, but you're going to be missed. And I especially appreciate the friendship that I have now with you, Pam, because I didn't know you before this at all.
Thank you, Priscilla.
You're here.
Thank you, Mary. Okay, I see Lily's hand is up. Lily, would you like to go ahead?
Hi, I just wanted to remind people that voting will take place this coming Tuesday, March 4th from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. at Tracy Hall. You're also welcome to pick up ballots and vote early or absentee anytime during normal business hours. And I would remind you all that we do close at noon on Monday the 3rd in order to prepare for the election. So we will not be distributing absentee ballot afternoon on Monday. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lily. Any questions for Lily on that? Okay. All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is our presentation by Studio Nexus. And we have Doug Sunsella from Studio Nexus. And I will turn the presentation over to Brennan, and then he can introduce Doug.
Okay, I think you just did. Not much more to say. Just as background for folks that might not be aware, we commissioned Studio Nexus, it's probably a year and a half ago maybe, to conduct a report on Tracy Hall and kind of the status and make some recommendations about things that could be improved. And that got delayed a bit as we awaited our energy audit through the MERP program. We actually did post the draft of the report in December, I think we determined, and we posted that again in the packet for folks that would like to take a look at that. So Doug is here today just to kind of walk through kind of the high points of his report, and we'll be able to, I think, answer questions if there are any about some of their findings. And then ultimately our next step would be to start to implement some of the suggestions that are on the list of the draft report, but that will be probably another meeting to really hone down into what we would like to try to tackle first as far as priorities. So that said, I think Doug is going to make a presentation here and may share his screen if that is something to put through here.
Thank you for having me join the meeting tonight. My name is Doug Sunsella. I'm with Studio Nexus Architects, and our office is located in White River Junction, just down the street. And I'll give a brief overview of the presentation. First, we'd just like to mention the project team members who worked on the report and feasibility study, a little bit of the history of Tracy Hall, provide a summary of the feasibility study and process, and then review the design option that we developed in response to some of the things we heard as we were conducting the study. So first, the project team members. The evaluations and planning for this feasibility study were a team effort and the results of a collaborative effort with the following partners. First, the town of Norwich, the town manager, Brennan Duffy, along with input from the Selectboard and town residents, town officials, and staff. Studio Nexus Architects and Planners, PC, we provided the overall design and team guidance to synthesize the report while providing general building accessibility overview. Engineering Services of Vermont, they are heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, and electrical engineering and plumbing, analysis and engineers, and then Waite Engineering and Design, who provided the structural review and analysis. So the next part is a brief history of Tracy Hall, just to give us a little bit of context of how we got to where we are and kind of where we might be going. It sometimes helps to have that perspective. So Tracy Memorial Hall is a town-owned building that was purpose-built to accommodate town activities in 1939. And according to the Norwich Historical Society website, in the 1920s, a retired cabinet maker and Civil War veteran of Company K of the 16th Vermont Regiment, James B. Tracy, lived on this property that we're on right now, which had been occupied by his family since 1829. And he was getting elderly and having no close heirs. Mr. Tracy remarked to his friend and neighbor one day, Dr. L.B. Jones, that, quote, he'd like advice as to how to leave his property so that it might do the most good after he was gone, unquote. Mr. Tracy followed Dr. Jones's advice by leaving the property to the town for a quote unquote fireproof town hall to be constructed, which would bear his name. And that's what we're sitting in now. Norwich's Tracy Memorial Hall, Town Hall, or simply referred to as Tracy Hall, was constructed between 1938 and 1939 as a federal public works administration PWA project. And it was provided with $22,090 as a grant toward the $49,215 total cost of the project. Things have changed since then in terms of inflation. And there's a chapter in a book by Della Sargent McAuley that wrote, quote, that to know your town is to understand better your state and national affairs, end quote. And what better place to understand Vermont Village than at town meeting? And in 1939, the opening of Tracy Memorial Hall welcomed a permanent home for community gatherings. It was a dream come true. Before Tracy Hall was constructed, the town meetings had been held in churches, meeting houses, the Norwich University, and above Merrill's store in the Union Hall. I don't know where that is, but it's
Dan and
might be
Witt's.
Dan and Witt's. That's what I figured. Now the town's March gathering happens in a home that also provides a center for the town with a stage, an auditorium, a gymnasium, and a well-equipped kitchen. That may have changed, the well-equipped kitchen. And she described the highlights of this event occurring in the 1940s when it was first opened. The interior of the space was updated in 1994, likely in response to the 1990 adaptation of the American with Disabilities Act, or the ADA, which reconfigured the offices, the bathrooms, the mechanical and electrical systems, and integrated a vertical circulation system, otherwise known as an elevator, into the front entry stairs. The building has changed little since this renovation is due for another renovation. So that gives you a little background. And then I'm on to kind of number 3 here to give you a summary of the feasibility study and the process we use. And the intent was to provide a comprehensive guide for long-term capital planning for Tracy Hall. It began with a site visit on November 1st of 2023 by assessing the building and grounds, and developed site and floor plans highlighting the deficiencies. We also conducted interviews with town staff who occupied each of the spaces and reviewed various systems with the long-term capital planning. Input from the Selectboard and citizens was obtained. Began with a site visit almost on November 1st of 2023 by assessing the building and grounds, consideration of the and developed site and floor plans highlighting the deficiencies. Plan options. We also conducted interviews with town staff who occupied each of the spaces and reviewed various systems with the long-term capital planning. Input from the Selectboard and citizens was obtained. Began with a site visit almost on November 1st of 2023 by assessing the building and grounds, consideration of the and developed site and floor plans highlighting the deficiencies. Plan options. We also conducted interviews with town staff who occupied each of the spaces and reviewed various systems with the long-term capital planning. Input from the Selectboard and citizens modernizing. Began with a site visit improving almost on November 1st of 2023 by assessing the building and grounds, consideration of the and developed site and floor plans. In addition to the drawings, written assessments were also developed that identify problems and deficiencies and analyze their causes, implications, and provide recommendations for solving them, which became the basis for this report. It turns in at about 47 pages total, roughly, with the drawings. I'll just go over some highlights. I don't want to dive too deep in the weeds. It was included in the packet, so if people wanted to do that, they could. But I'd like to just give a brief overview of some of the existing buildings deficiencies, which we kind of annotated on the plans to make it kind of easier to understand where they may fit in. So in terms of the site plans and utilities, the septic tank is thought to be located below the parking space on the north side of the building and is known to back up. So that's one. There are various diesel and oil tanks on this side of the building. Some are still functional for purposes of use in the mechanical room. Others might be buried and no longer used. The accessible parking space does not meet the code. It's also across the way from the other parking spaces, and there's no sidewalk connecting it to the main entry. At least that's not shoveled at this point. So that's kind of some rough site things. There's dumpsters. There's a few other things that could be improved that we showed on a new plan. Then the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and fire protection systems. They've been well maintained, and the staff has done a good job keeping those up. And we're sort of putting Band-Aids on them at this point, is my understanding, with some of the heating systems and things. But they're basically at the end of their useful life and are at the point where they need to be replaced. The ductless air conditioning systems no longer operate, so there's a little bit of an issue in the summer with that. Providing fresh air for the building is not not, other than windows, isn't really there in a mechanical way through a forced air system. Insulating and the hot and cold water pipes, placing light bulbs with LEDs. The main septic line, as I said, backs up. So just understanding where that occurs, if there's a bend or what needs to happen out there. Looking at sprinkler in the building because it is assembly space and how that would come to fruition. Looking at electrical services that would be adequate for new mechanical systems design, especially if the town is looking to go all the way to net zero, it would likely be an electrical solution. So figuring out how that occurs, that's the mechanical. And then, as I mentioned during the historical review, it was updated in '94 and is kind of due for another look at the renovation. Just the finishes are getting older and more tired. They're on the end of their useful life. If you look at the carpet and some of the finishes, repairing the walls, ceilings, the vault in the record room is inaccessible for people with mobility disabilities and would require a ramp. The restrooms lack ventilation. There's some leaks in the ceiling. The lister's office lacks privacy since the kitchen is in the same room. There's lack of acoustic separation between the lister's office and this room, the gym, and the other doors that come in and out of the building. Those were listed as programmatic concerns. The stage is not accessible for people with disabilities. And there was a question about using the underside of the stair for storage, which could happen if you do it properly and fire rated. We're looking at the server and thinking that should be moved out of the planning and zoning room and into a lockable room that's separate. Repairing the poor drainage issues in the basement. We heard that there were sometimes leaks. So considering a drip strip around there. Confirming that the number of plumbing fixtures are adequate. And I'm just going to kind of flip through the drawings. So as I'm reading this off, these are annotated floor plans with numbers and where these different deficiencies and things occur to kind of correlate with what I'm talking about. So you'll see the numbers and then what the issue is. And I'll just flip to the next one. So it talks about the stage, like lacking a lift, things like that. And then the last one, we also did the top floor. Most of these have to do with the air conditioning system. And then we know the elevator is kind of at the end of its useful life too. Let's see. And the last one was just confirming the number of plumbing fixtures on this floor is adequate for the activities that occur. And then, so the next part goes into the elevations, which are the outside of the building and kind of the issues that we found there. The basic structure, which is it's constructed of a load-bearing masonry on concrete foundations. The configuration of the building is in good condition and has served the town well for 85 years. Masonry was likely chosen for its fire-resistant characteristics by its benefactor, as I mentioned, James Tracy, who was likely aware of the 1866 Norwich University fire that happened 70 years earlier. And the exterior of the building has not been significantly altered since it was built. There are some components of the building elements that require attention to improve the indoor air quality and comfort inside the building, and they're listed here. The windows are rotted down near the lower levels because they're so close to grade and they get splash on them, and then it rots out the wood. And on this side, there's snow that sloughs off the roof and ends up right at grade, and then sometimes it's plowed right up in there. So you're getting water kind of into those as well. The slate roof needs monitoring. 80 years is kind of the end of slate's useful life. It can go 100, but it really should be looked at kind of every year just to make sure slates are in place kind of on an annual basis until they're replaced. Insulation and air sealing is necessary to reduce energy consumption and would reduce the size of the mechanical equipment as well. So if it's an all-in approach, that you'd want to balance those two things and make sure they're carefully done. In general, there was not really any consideration to energy efficiency at the time it was constructed because it was before the kind of the energy crisis and things like that had happened. You could just heat a building and it just go out and it would draft through and you get natural ventilation. Nowadays, we tighten buildings up and then we introduce mechanical air conditioning to supplement that to be more efficient. And to get to net zero, to get the building to net zero would require a careful approach to mitigate moisture if we insulate from the inside, because we likely don't want to do it from the outside because of the historic nature of it, that we have a risk of trapping moisture or affecting the bricks on the outside. So there's a whole level of detail that needs to go into that and have it be carefully thought through. In general, if you look at the outside of the building, if we keep it as the status quo and don't do anything, that's obviously going to be the least costly initially, but long-term that would likely be a larger cost. And then sort of an interim measure would be to do something to improve the efficiency. But if you don't go all the way, then you may have the wrong size equipment in the future. And if you go to the net zero, that would probably require the least amount of long-term, input in terms of annual costs. And typically, we would recommend working with Efficiency Vermont to look at, and they can do outlays of those and life cycle costs and evaluate that with you. And I think there was some of that done in an energy report through the MERV program, I believe. So there's some of that information available that's already been done as well. So that gets us kind of through the existing conditions and the energy efficiency. And let's read what else I had here. So to really tackle everything, we would recommend getting a new air sealing and insulation, a new mechanical, electrical, and plumbing system and distribution provided while the walls are removed so you can access them to avoid the air leaks and traps that you might get. And then looking at the attic to insulate it and condition it so a new ventilation system could be put up in the attic. That would also involve structural reinforcement, which is required anyway, so you would do it. So you could insulate and put the equipment up there all in one, and possibly do solar. And I believe our structural engineers said that they could be added to the roof to offset the electrical demand once they're reinforced. So there's that capability. The last section of the presentation really gets into sort of pricing options, and we identified several items for immediate action, which we worked with Brennan a little bit on what he saw as kind of, you need to do this year. And then we looked at three scenarios. First was limited improvements to keep the building functional for the short term. Number two was updates to meet the immediate programming and current energy code. And then the third was to try to achieve net zero ready and kind of address those long-term programmatic needs. So this site plan kind of looks at how you take that space that's the handicap spot here and relocate it to the other side, putting a place where a person can get out and unload and then get onto a sidewalk and come to the front door. So it's basically your accessible path from the parking to the building is like your first step in improving accessibility. And then there's kind of a sprinkling of notes around here about those other items we mentioned in terms of the septic system, the electrical upgrades, those kinds of things are notated on here as well in terms of what you would do to kind of improve what you have. And then this plan just looks at basically extending this hallway one bay down to these columns here, and then adding changing the lister's office from this space to go at the end of this hallway. So we have a lister office here, and then a conference room on the other side that would go into here, and then that would flip it so the select board room would be on the wall that has a large window inside of this. So just kind of flipping those two spaces around. In the kitchen, we could either stay where it is or it could get relocated into its own little alcove over here. Just depends on how much you want to spend. So that's kind of the plan we came up with programmatically to address some of the concerns that we had. We added a ramp in the record room, and then we put a screen wall for the town clerk. We're updating and putting in a new lift, that kind of stuff. And then kind of on the way up, we're addressing all the mechanical systems, adding a lift to get up onto the stage. And then Similarly, we're looking at a way to get into the attic, not through a trapdoor, but through a regular stair. So probably taking out those closets and putting a stair in there. So you have an accessible way to kind of get up there and service your equipment. So that's kind of rounds out the options. I can go into look, I can just put these up as slides and people can read through them. So this slide identifies the immediate action items. See if I can zoom in. There we go. And it's sort of a repeat, but I'll leave those up there just for a second and we can come back to these and I'll finish up. And then the second one, if I can get it to go forward. There we go. So this is option one where you see kind of get all the low hanging fruit done and dealt with. So the building is stabilized for what I call the short term, being like the next 20, 30 years. And then kind of shooting for the moon if we wanted to look at getting all the way to energy code. It's not required, it's a historic building, but is it the right thing to do? Possibly. And then, yeah, the shoot for the moon is getting all the way to net zero. And that may require getting offsite solar or other energy sources to do your offsets if that meet that goal. So that's really a very quick version of the 47 pages. There's a lot more detail, but this hopefully gives you a good understanding of where we came from, where it could go, what possibilities there are. And then at the last line are kind of talking about next steps would be to include the select board in assigning a steering committee or task force that could start to tackle this with maybe a liaison from the select board who can provide guidance for the next steps. And then getting construction manager on site to look at feasibility and cost estimating of some of these preliminary options and floor plans for you to then dig into the next step.
Doug, are these three slides, options 1, 2, and 3, in the presentation packet, or is this new?
It's just oriented a different direction. So it's on page, yeah, I just oriented them this way so they're more legible. They are on pages 6, 7, and 8, 6 and 7. And they're just cut and pasted right in there, so they're no different than your.
Okay, great. All right, thank you for pointing that out. Does anyone have any questions? Mary, go ahead.
I have a question, sort of health and safety questions. So whatever of the three, I sort of think of them as Goldilocks levels we do, I would like to make sure that all the staff have very good quality of air everywhere. And also and this might sound a little dramatic, but I'd like to also know that everybody's safe if someone comes into the building who's not friendly. So I'm just thinking most people have an office they can retreat to and slam the door and lock it. But I'm wondering about, especially on this level, thinking about that. And it's kind of odd because, you know, we want our officials who are in the building to be the public face of the town, which is really good. But I don't want anybody to be vulnerable. So I'm sort of wondering about that.
Yeah, that's a good point. So in schools, they would do lockdown. In this scenario, that could happen too, where the hardware could be such that it could be quote unquote locked down, and there could be a system that notifies everyone if we needed to do that it could happen. And then the town clerk's office may be another vulnerable spot where it's completely open that
Exactly.
we could consider, you know, a transaction window that has the fortification or is bullet resistant, that kind of thing. So that there are definitely possibilities to do all that incorporated. Going back to your first point about air quality, if we go to the code level or net zero level or even other levels, we would look to introduce a heat recovery ventilator that would take outside air preheated and then send it into the building preheated to help get, you know, moist, damp air out of here in the summer and recirculate, you know, fresh air into the spaces.
And that would be comprehensive. So
It would be the
all
whole,
the areas.
it would be the whole building, and you'd likely put it in the attic and then service it down through the building that way. It could be done floor by floor. They also make them done, they can do them that way as well. They just get really big if you do a whole building. So there's a couple different approaches you can take. They also make them directly out of the wall for each one, but you have a brick building and it's historic. So trying to hide it would be the approach I would recommend. Yeah.
If it could go out to cupola.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, it might be the duct or the louver goes up there possibly,
Yes.
or it's in the ends, the gable ends. the
Yes.
parts that goes, yeah, but
Thank you.
concealing it the best we can.
Priscilla, you had a question?
Yeah, a couple of questions. It wasn't clear to me, but perhaps these plans, are they like cumulative? So that we say we went to option 3,
Mhm.
which is of course always my inclination to just do it right and do it long term. But does that mean we would start by, we would do everything that's there on option 1 and everything that's there on option 2? And do these things build on each other or are they not exactly? That,
Yeah.
because I was thinking, can you just give me a list of, we need to do these things in this order? And I'm not
Sure.
really feeling that.
They're more cumulative. Yeah, so the list kind of expands as you go down. And there's some things that may overlap, like, so I say septic. In option 3, we're replacing the tank.
Right.
We're not guessing at the height. We're not going to try to do a line. We're going to replace it. So we know it absolutely works. It's at the right
Yeah.
level. It can drain it by gravity. We don't have to pump it. That's what option 3 is. The other options look at finding out, someone said there's a jog in it. Well, let's dig out down and fix the jog in it. Maybe that's a good approach for a.
No, I agree.
Yeah,
Just
so-
replace the.
Yeah, so that's the levels you're gonna see in here. So what I did is I broke it down by utilities and site, building envelope, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, and then program. And it kind of expands, and you get the Cadillac as the last option. But you have to look at the previous ones to understand all the other things. It just depends on the appetite for the town and how if it's a bond vote or whatever it is. If you don't get that first bond, then we pull back option 3 things, and we look at what can we get option 2 to pass? Oh, that doesn't pass. Can we get option 1A to pass? Like, where do we go? So it's just a how far is the town's appetite for funding something? So there's kind of a starting point, a mid, and a high reach. So we felt that was the most kind of, for this feasibility study, the right approach to take in terms of how we have a contractor price it initially. So then you get order of magnitude on 3 different kind of scenarios, and how shocking it is or isn't. Then do you get sticker shock, or is it something that, oh, we can get behind this? We've had this for 80 years. We want it for another 80. How do you do that? You do that with option 3, is what I would say.
Thank you. Marcia?
So would it be fair to say that we could step this out and say we do option 1 in 1 year, option 2 in another year, option 3, or does it?
No,
go-
I mean, so there's a thing called kind of when a contractor comes on, they'll mobilize. And every time a contractor mobilizes, it costs money. So if you mobilize 3 times, you're going to have 3 mobilization costs. And Division 1, which is Porta Johns, every time they come, an office, and all the things associated with their work that they're going to do each time they mobilize will be paid for every time. So the more you can narrow it to 1 mobilization and effort, the less disruption, because some of these involve moving everybody out of here for a duration. So if you can minimize that to 1 time with 1 option to do as much as you can, that's the best bang for your buck. And whether it's option 1, 2, or 3, you're going to have something like that happen
Okay,
and be most cost effective.
and a follow-up?
Yep.
One of the things that you talked about was, because I'm concerned about air too,
Yeah.
Since COVID, I think maybe if we had windows for places, they might do double duty in terms of both security protection, for an assault, plus also protection for like COVID. But I'm concerned about that air. And then I was interested on page 21, you talk about a fixed shut window in the assistance room, I think, for the town clerk's office.
Mhm.
And that, a fixed window screams liability to me. And so I understand that there's probably exhaust issues over there, but that kind of thing makes me nervous.
Okay. Yeah, let me check. 20.
For reasons of, you can't get out the window, fire being trapped inside, I see.
Yeah, and I think we're envisioning sprinkler in the building because of the assembly occupancy. So if that happens, then windows are no longer required for egress because you have a fire suppression system in every space. So typically you would see egress windows for non-sprinkler multifamily where someone would have to get out as a second way out. But when we get into commercial, then there's a level of safety that there's enough time because of the sprinklers that you can actually egress safely out of the building at that point and don't have to start jumping out windows or risking people trying to operate a window and getting out it.
Nervous lawyer.
Yeah. So, but the code recognizes this, so
Okay.
it's codified. So sprinklers save lives and they save property from damage. So insurers like those work. Yep. So sprinklers are like having a firefighter in every room. Is how some people think of it. But yeah, that's a good point.
Pam, I don't know if you see my hand.
Yeah, I did see you, Roger. So you're next. Go ahead.
Great, thanks. Okay. Oh gosh. So it's I guess in my mind, this has clearly been what I might call, or what is called a needs assessment. I wouldn't go as far as to say this is a feasibility study because we haven't costs, for example. How do we know what is feasible if we don't necessarily have the costs of these three options? That being said, I recognize that it may be because there was a lot of things to explore, and the board themselves didn't necessarily, it takes this kind of work for a legislative body or a group of people to really sort of like get on the same page of where we need to be. So that being said, do you recommend in terms of what goes forward, do you recommend that there needs to be sort of a town of Norwich consensus around these options, or before we enter something what I might consider a feasibility study where costs are attached to it and more than just sort of needs and programmatic issues are highlighted, but rather, I mean, you say septic tank, but there's a whole world of, I mean, can we even just replace a tank, right? Since 2007, when the state took control of all this kind of permitting. So like I find this really helpful in terms of knowing the deficiencies for accessibility, in being able to engage the staff to understand more about their office conditions and the programmatic needs. But I think it stays silent on a mechanical system recommendation, right? Which has been like which is like something we talk about a lot in our town. And then some of these bigger questions like, replace the septic, like does not yet, I do not understand the feasibility of that yet, right? So I guess my question in all of this is, do we need to do, what work do we need to do before we engage an RFQ or an RFP process to begin teasing out these three options that you've outlined for us?
Yeah, so what could happen, and as you pointed out, this is sort of a first pass in terms of what we've assessed and what we might recommend. So there's really kind of one option with three levels to kind of go to. And in the RFP that we were presented with, the next step was outlined as going to a construction manager or a estimator to do exactly what you said, to look at the cost behind this. And if we had a construction manager, I think you'd get better understanding of feasibility in terms of how does it actually happen? Can all this be done? The answer is yes, it's all feasible. The question is, how much does it cost to do it? So in order to get that answer, the next step is really to bring in that construction manager who would have the expertise of the means and methods to get the work done and put a price to what's been so far outlined. There are recommendations about the mechanical systems in here. I touched on them briefly, and there's a lot more in-depth writing about what they found as well and what their recommendations were. So there may need to be more narrative, perhaps, or a process where we work with a construction manager. They get this information, a floor plan with a narrative to say, what do you think your ballpark price is? That way you can start to get into it. If they need more, then we would need to draw more. So it's a chicken and egg thing of how much do we draw and spend money drawing before we get to a point where a contractor can adequately price it. So it seems like pricing it might be at this level, maybe helpful. It's not going to be the final number, but it will possibly be helpful to gauge the level of where the select board wants to go. Yeah, go ahead and follow up on that because I may not have answered it, but I'm trying to.
Yes, I guess my follow-up is just, yes, we want to know the how and the if of any of these sort of three projects. I guess my question that I'll try to ask more explicitly is, do you recommend that the town of Norwich knows which one they want before they look to bid someone, before they look to engage someone, whether that be a construction manager or another set of expertise? Do you have to do a feasibility study where you're looking for an option for or a combination of these, or does this town need to say we're doing short term or we're seeking long term? How would you?
Yep.
Explicit does this town need to be as we engage further experts, would you say?
Great question. I think the short answer is no, that it doesn't necessarily have to be narrowed to a single option. I think this gives you and the contractor and the town opportunity to tease out what option might be the best fit and the right cost. So what this service is called through a construction manager is pre-construction services, where they might even come in here and cut little openings to understand better what's behind a wall or look at pipes or other things that we've found. So everything I've said is only based on what's available to visual, inspection. There's been no demolition or anything done to the walls or sills to find out where rod's occurring. So the contractor can bring in that next level that you're talking about and try to get a better understanding of those three levels and pricing them out to help you then make a decision to try. And the goal there would be to spend as little as money to get as much information from that construction manager to help steer you in a path of 1, 2, or 3. So that's what I would see kind of being the next step is, could you find someone that can price this information at least at this preliminary stage? It's really hard to do. There's not a lot of information. These studies are done sort of frugally, to be honest, and then they're trying to do it with little information. We'll try to supplement that as much as we can. It's what you put into it is what you get out of it. So we'll try to work with them to help them give as much background from what we found, so they have a knowledgeable basis to develop that estimate.
I have one more question, if I may, Pam.
Yep.
Sure, go ahead, Roger.
And then, given sort of in many ways, the magnitude of what you've outlined for us, and knowing the world of construction, right, and its, all of its challenges right now. How long do you expect a town like us, with all of our bureaucracies, right? How long do you expect a design development phase, or I forget what term you used, the pre-construction phase is reasonable? The other thing that I'm concerned about is, the people who are most engaged in this project, circle off, right?
Yeah.
Two of us are gone. We've had the benefit of working on this I worked on it for 4 years in some ways. The new people coming in, I'm sure, are lovely and engaged, but we also have some other board members who will circle off in the term of a pre-construction. And as projects go on, right, they take a lot of political will. And if you could foresee the people who are most informed or most for the project will be replaced by people eager to control the costs of the project, right? So what is your sense of a pre-construction timeline? And then I guess I could tack on the question of how do you engage a community through a long pre-construction and then construction project?
Yep. Great questions again. So yeah, I don't have a crystal ball on that full process, but what we can control is our design process and our ability to work with a contractor to help them get a number, which Brennan can do too. So to that extent, we can put this out to an RFP, get numbers back, and then re-engage with the select board to then hopefully make a decision. There's the politics. Yeah, that's where the time can get evaporated, so to speak, or processed. I mean, it's a process, and then you engage the town to try to get behind the select board's decision, which is another process. So you'd want that to be timed likely at town meetings so that there can be input into that process. So just knowing that we're in March, like, could you get something by next year to present to the town? That could be possible. Or does it, if the select board is on board and on task, that could certainly be a possibility. And maybe a good goal to think about.
Right.
Or if you can't quite make it, then you go to that next one, or you hold a special meeting. But the town meeting's the ideal time to do it when you get the best engagement with the town in Vermont. So I would think about your town meetings and work off of that basis and look to get as much done as you can and at least inform people at that next one. And then if it's not quite there, you go to the next one. And I know it shifts.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I appreciate your work.
Yeah, no, great questions.
Thank you, Roger. Marcia?
Can you just clarify, is the construction manager someone that works for the ultimate firm that does the work, or is that a third party?
It can be. So depending on how funding comes in, there may be a stipulation where it has to be an estimator. It's complicated. Depends on if it's federal dollars or state. Sometimes state doesn't have that stipulation. Federal may, it depends on if it's rural development money. It really can run the gamut. Brendan might have to do some research on that. But hopefully you'd want continuity, but you don't always get it. So it could be different, and that's okay. Sometimes the danger is that original firm that does it, the new one coming in will say, well, that's all junk. We can't use those numbers. So continuity is ideal, but do you always get it in the perfect world? No. Yeah.
Okay, I have a couple of questions before I move to the public, and my biggest concern is we're very warm here in the building tonight, but the heating system has been a concern for the last 5 years.
Yeah.
And through some Herculean efforts, Ben has been able to keep the heating system going. Is it possible that the heating system could be replaced before the next heating system if we don't have a firm plan to do everything?
Yep.
Can we at least get something going on the heating front so that we are keeping this building functional?
Yeah, well, we can talk to our mechanical engineers to address this more succinctly than I can, but the thought would be to replace in kind what you have to get you through that interim period before you can get to the town meeting and town votes. Because I think you're running up against parts that are not, you can't find replacement parts anymore. So it could either be done through your vendor and you could procure something that could then be purchased and then possibly resold at the time that you do the full renovation, if it's 3 or 4 years, whatever timelines down the road. So it's a piece of equipment that has some value at some future point too, that's more efficient, all those kinds of things. So yeah, I think that's high on the list and that should be looked at.
One of the things I saw in there was heat pumps with a backup of propane. Maybe we do the propane boiler and get that installed, and that would stay. And then we could look at what the first line of heating and cooling would be if it's air to water heat pumps or whatever.
Yeah, so you run the risk of oversizing equipment if you're going to eventually insulate an air seal. You might put something in that will then be 5 times larger than what you need. So I'd have to talk to Dan Dupris, our mechanical engineer, to really understand what he might recommend. I'm not a mechanical engineer and would defer to them on their approach to that. But just in general, I would try to think of it being a step where you install it, you have value invested in it, and that you could hopefully get some resale value out of it. I don't know if that's possible or if that's even done, but that's the only way I can think of it. You know, who's going to need a piece of equipment later on down the road that's specifically sized for this building? I don't know. That's the problem. So if we could think of some other way to do it, maybe there's smaller units that make more sense that can be easily resold. That's how I would kind of approach it. Start thinking in those terms of what's serviceable and what can be reused or repurposed. That's the task I would give the mechanical engineer.
On the cost front, we have some money in a reserve fund for Tracy Hall renovations. And we have an article on the town warrant to add some money from our surplus to this fund. Are there grants out there that the town could apply for, state or federal grants that might help supplement what we have set aside?
Yeah, there are a number. You need to talk to those agencies. I could talk to Brennan about that. We could come up with a list. There's rural development, there's historic preservation grants, there's all kinds of different grants you could look at. I don't have a list with me or anything, but there's definitely a number of places to look into. Yeah, it's a whole.
I'd like to see us minimize borrowing as much as possible.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Okay.
And you do have a historic building, so I think this can fit into a lot of good categories for, you know, it's a municipal, it has active use, it's a town building, you know, it's central, it's basically the heart of the community, I would say. So you've got a really good story behind it to try to garner those grants if you can get a grant writer to do it. Yeah.
Right. Tom, did I see you put your hand up?
Yeah.
You want to come up and have a seat and introduce yourself, please?
Yes. Thanks, Pam. Tom Griggs, citizen and member of Norwich Energy Committee. A question for Doug and to the select board in general, going forward with whatever committee might pursue this feasibility study. Doug, my question is, and I may have missed it, is there a link between the feasibility study and the MERP report? Because I would want to be sure that if the feasibility study is the starting document for future committee members, for example, I'd want to make sure that they know about the data in the MERP report, because there are a lot of data, cost comparisons, recommendations, fairly sophisticated analyses, it appears to me. So I don't know if they sandwich, if they're totally independent, but it would be good to link them somehow.
Yeah, we discussed that, and I discussed that. So the way the process went, we were engaged, we started our work, and then Brennan notified me that they won the MERP grant. So we said, let's pause our study. Let's wait for the MERP grant information to be available.
Sure.
And there was an engineering firm that had completed that. We waited for that. We provided that to our engineers. And then it was a sandwich. So it came in between, and we paused. That's why the project took so long, was to wait for that information to become available. And then we did consider linking it and actually including it in the appendix, but it was already at 50 pages. So
sure.
That's the only reason, but we could make mention of it for sure in some of these portions to make people aware that there is a study, and we should put that in there. Yeah, I agree.
And particularly including the cost comparisons, they may be out of date by now, but
right.
I think those would be important for people trying to make some initial assessment of options 1, 2, or 3 as the most likely path to pursue.
Sure, yeah.
And payback periods is, as part of the cost comparisons.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, no, it definitely was considered and sandwiched, as you say.
great. Thanks.
Anyone want to come up?
Oh,
Certainly.
Thanks. Chemo Griggs, architect. Sorry.
No, that's all right.
Soon to be a board member.
And yeah, running unopposed.
Oh, great.
Great report. Thank you very much for doing it. The Tracy Hall, as you know, it's a tough building. It's, you can't expand it easily or
Right.
reconfigure it very easily. I don't believe, even though it has historic destination, it's not protected in the sense that you have to treat it with kid gloves all the way around. I was curious to see, to ask you if this building serves us well, the way we're using it, perhaps comparing to other towns, but also thinking about when this building was built, we had a different structure. When I was little, the town clerk and the police were, on the first floor. This was a cafeteria with a kitchen over there. Came over here and ate. Boy Scouts met back there. And over time, the number of offices, the types of offices, perhaps the size requirements, storage requirements have changed, but the building hasn't much. And I'm curious if I've also recognized there are other public spaces that we can use or do use from time to time that can supplement the spaces here. So if you were given the freedom to think through how this building, perhaps combined with others, could serve the town best, would your plan be any different?
Absolutely. I think you know the answer. So I'll just do a quick diagram. You put your finger like this and put a gym right here. These are the town offices and this is the basement. So you have a gymnasium surrounded by offices in an L shape, basically, which is not the way you would lay out a kind of a town office. So it's laid out in a way to fit on the site. So it's kind of squished in and forced into this L shape. So the only way to kind of go might be up, but that's challenging because then it changes the nature of the building. So it's not how you might want to lay out a town office, but if you're trying to work with what you have, kind of extending this seems like the one easy way to do it. Is it the right way for the long term of the town? That's a cost question. So how else could you configure it? Yeah, it's a tricky question because there's no more land here. What I would see is more interconnectedness between the town offices to the extent you could. Hartford has a similar situation where they took their town offices and organized it around a central, kind of like it is here, a central stairwell, but there are divisions on each floor, but there's a central meeting space in the middle, which this hallway kind of acts as. But so I don't know if I answered your question, but it's a challenging building, like you said, and because of its configuration and masonry structure, it's very difficult to add on to and tough to reconfigure to get that kind of sense of togetherness, I would say.
Are there any offices or activities here that you think could just as well be satisfied by an offsite meeting space or remote office? I don't have any.
The record vault could be one of those areas. I don't know where you're at in terms of digitizing things, but it kind of could be seen as an antiquated thing. If everything's digitized, you could gain some room in that vault as a potential space gaining opportunity, if you will. There's also a few vaults in the far rooms up there that I don't know if they serve a purpose. Somewhat, I guess they're used.
Storage.
They're storage.
Yeah.
But they're really thick
Some. Well, the
walls.
finance office is used for
They use
financial
it.
records.
Yeah.
but my
So some of
office
those
is
vaults you know, how useful are they? But we're talking smaller space, but the big vault would be the one spot I could see as a potential for accommodating something else that if you're digitized, you may be able to recoup space.
Right.
But other than that, I didn't see many opportunities to really, if the town is looking to go another 80 years, is it adequate? I think is what you're getting at.
Just thinking ahead.
No, it's hard. It's a tough one to answer. I think flipping these spaces might be better, but is it still big enough? It's hard to know that exactly, but from what I heard from the staff, that just getting ventilation and air conditioning, all that stuff would be a huge step toward comfort and safety, as the board noted. So,
Do I have time for another question?
sure.
Moving the listers closer to there,
Mhm.
gets it closer to the other offices that they might work with. And it seemed to me, well, maybe I was upstairs today at the planning and then
Yeah.
it was here. And does it make sense to think about filling this space with offices? I mean, I know it takes away from the space I will be occupying. But does it make any sense to consider turning one floor into an office where everybody can meet and talk, and
It could, yeah. Yeah, I mean, consolidating space.
probably making enemies right now?
No, I think,
Stirring the pot.
no, I think that's like what Roger was sort of alluding to, is that we've done more of an assessment. We've come up with recommendations. Is the plan perfect? Probably not. We didn't spend a lot of time other than addressing those immediate issues. I think what would need to happen is a more like staffing questionnaire. Where do you see your staff going in 10 years, 20 years?
Okay.
And is the space adequate? And does there need to be more continuity of offices? And if there's a yes to those, then I could see that working out really well, where you might consolidate on the one floor. And this would be the likely floor. But do you want to consolidate into a basement? Is
Right.
the question?
Yeah, but that's design development. Sort
Yeah,
of.
it's like the next phase. I agree that you could really shuffle the building around and rename the rooms.
Yeah.
And that would be perfectly fine to do. Yeah, I could see that happening.
The final question is, there are many elements of this are about preserving or restoring. Those could probably be separated out and done anytime, right? Restoring windows or keeping the roof on, and those are maintenance items, not necessarily part of an architectural. I mean, they could be. We could do those without putting anything else.
Correct. Yeah, with the exception of if you're doing storms and energy upgrades. So looking at the energy, it's a chicken and egg. Do you want to restore your windows before you put the storm, like that kind of stuff?
Okay.
So if you're going to do an energy improvement, are windows part of that package? And is it a storm on the outside or the inside? And are you restoring before you do it? Kind of that thing.
Okay.
So, but yes, it could be done later. But then the energy model would have to consider that, which would if you're going to do it, it would oversize your equipment potentially, because windows only gets.
I was thinking doing it earlier.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Then perfect. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, that could be an isolated first step anytime. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Good questions.
Thank you, Kim. Roger, I see your hand is up. Go ahead.
Okay, so with all due respect to Mr. Griggs, because God bless you for serving, right? Like this is exactly my fear in terms of this project and sort of that idea of continuity of leadership. Like when we started this project, we talked about what it might look like if we were to see this as a gymnasium and a solely programmatic space, and that we were to shift town offices to, say, rented spaces. Should we have a town manager investigate the feasibility of a long-term rental agreement with rental offices across the street, for example, right? And so we had decided that the current uses, as much as they were, at odds and, all things, that we didn't have it. I would say we probably didn't have the courage to actually say offices should be separated from this recreational space, but nonetheless, it was discussed. And so I think as we begin investing more money on paper, not construction, right? And sort of doing the work of thinking through, maybe over dialectically, we should recognize that we need to be very clear in our expectations and make a series of I statements about what it is that the body wants for the town, and not falter, because it creates more unclear deliverables for the people you ultimately are paying. So we talked about that. We made the decision that we couldn't make a decision, and we moved on. And that's why we have the work that we have now, which I would argue is very helpful, but we could have had more if we were even more clear. And that will be the hardest challenge. We're not a private client. We are a town. Sorry to Doug.
All right, thank you, Roger. Marcia?
This is a little bit of a crazy question, but not having seen the poor man's will. This has to be, it's supposed to be a town hall, but given all that we have to do, I'm sure this isn't true, but would it be cheaper to just tear it down and start again?
I've said that before.
That could be your option for, if you get a construction manager, they could run a cost per square foot on that. And yeah, purpose build it for a new one. Yeah, that's either here or somewhere else. But at least give you that on paper so you know, what are we looking at for a new building? Or what's the value of this existing building, sort of thinking of it in reverse. Yeah, I mean, this has a square footage and has use and things like that. The bones are good. So I would look at that. I mean, add that as option 4. That's a pretty attainable one to get to, like another number to get.
Absolutely, of course, not holding you to it, but do you think it would be like crazy different to tear it down and start again? Or
well, it depends on what the spaces are inside. Like if we're going with what Roger's talking about, and there's a communal aspect to it with rentable space, then it might be another floor. I really don't know. I mean, it's hard to say, but that's where I could see it going, is like, oh,
yeah,
because there's no room.
right.
And you might need more parking. So I could see it getting more parking and going up higher. Like if you had a totally clean slate, that's what would likely happen. Push this out to the corner like it is, and then have parking in the rear as much as possible, and then screen it with landscape street sides.
Put parking underneath.
It's expensive.
Yeah.
You can, but
Yeah.
structured parking is really expensive.
Okay, I see one more hand is up. I would like to kind of wrap this up soon. So I see Chief Roman has had his hand up for a while. Chief,
Hey, good evening.
Go
Thanks.
ahead.
I'll be brief because it's already been brought up in one capacity, but the duress alarms within the building need to be overhauled as well. And I'd like to see some attention paid to I guess the overall building security. It sort of cries out for an access control system. And I would suggest that maybe we look at a comprehensive one town-wide, building off of the one that exists at DPW already. We certainly would need one. We certainly need to look into it at the public safety facility, and having that one comprehensive town-wide solution seems to be the right way to go. And at the risk of taking a beating, I think it's probably time to look at some cameras around the building as well.
Okay, thank you, Chief. All right, any other questions or comments?
Thanks for getting us started.
Yeah, so just in terms of what we heard, I guess I'll circle back with Brennan and then discuss what of these would be kind of incorporated into. We're still in draft form, so we still have ability to maneuver a few things and take these into consideration and get them incorporated. So appreciate all the input. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So we will move along to our next agenda item, which is the Community Collaborative Grant Application Request. And we had a letter from Jess Phelps in the packet, and Jess is here. And I guess they're in kind of the initial phases of going for a VCDP grant. So Jess, you want to introduce yourself and tell us what you've got in mind?
Yeah, good afternoon or good evening. Jess Phelps from the Community Collaborative. We've been here a couple times with different grant requests. The grant we're looking at right now is called the Vermont Community Development Program Implementation Grant. And this grant really helps with ADA accessibility. And that's one of the big things that our addition on the rear that the Development Review Board has already approved is going to be focused on. So we've talked to the state staff and they're pretty interested in our project, which would be great. The grant cycle that we're looking to apply is likely the July, August kind of Q3 window. But we have another grant that is federal funding that is requiring us to go through environmental review right now. So what the VCDB staff indicated is if we got the town's endorsement for us to be the application this year in the town, they could start the environmental review process for their grant to align with the one we're already doing. So we only have to do it once, which would be huge. So that's why we're here tonight, is to get the town's endorsement of our future application so we can get started and not have to go through a NEPA process twice, which doesn't sound like a terribly good time. Yeah, Brett.
So just my familiarity with the program, I know those environmental assessments do have a shelf life. It's not extensive, but if you do it and then you could use that, I think it's 6 or 8 or 12 months.
Yeah, so what they said is if we go through the process and get the environmental release, so we get that release, you essentially are evergreen at that point. But you're right, there is a shelf life that we have to hit, and that's exactly why we're trying to tier the timeline.
Roger?
Is anyone concerned about endorsing grants for community building, which I assume is going to be billed as the heart of the community or the future heart of the community, when we will soon need to come up for grants for perhaps another heart of the community? Is there like an austerity mindset that you think these agencies have that we need to be concerned about? And by the way, there's like at least 4 hearts of the community and we really just need office space. Do you understand my question, Pam?
I guess what you're asking is, would this compete with the town going for a grant for another project?
Yeah, do we have any sense of that from these funders? Do they see 2 projects in Norwich, if one's endorsed by the town, is that what we get for a little bit?
Well, from what I read in Jess's letter, we get 1 grant per year, right? Is that right? And that
For each category, you could get a feasibility grant, which is a different grant category. You could even do that at the same time that we're seeking the implementation grant. So it's per category of VCDP.
Okay, did you get that, Roger? It's per category. So they're going for the implementation grant, but there are other categories that we could apply for, such as a feasibility grant, if we had an inclination to maybe do a feasibility study for Tracy Hall or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's not just 1 per year total, it's 1 per category per year.
Yes, that's lovely. I think we just need to be mindful of, our endorsements in any given year, right?
Okay, all right, that's point well taken. Any other comments or questions?
I was just going to comment again, I'm from my prior life in Rutland. I'm familiar with the programs. I think to Roger's point, we have the ability to apply for a grant every year in those categories. And they're all supposed to stand on their own merits.
Mm-hmm.
I think there is some concern, like if Norwich got a grant in 1 year, we went back the next year and said, well, we're looking for another grant. You have people that are obligated to spread this money around the state. And you also have, for the VCDP program, some fairly stringent guidelines that you have to meet as far as, are you even eligible to apply? And it does sound like the community collaborative is going to check one of those boxes that would allow it to go after VCDP money. I couldn't say today whether Tracy Hall renovation is even going to check a box there that would be making us eligible. Maybe, but we don't know that.
Okay. That's good.
So I guess my point is, I don't see any other grant this year for the town that would look for this type of funding. So in that case, it makes sense. We might want to just be cognizant that if we come in the next year and ask for another, multi-million-dollar grant, even if we could do that, it might be looked at as, well, Norwich has gotten something recently. We're going to spread this money around to other parts of the state.
Marcia?
How do they define recently?
Well, again, in theory, every grant application stands on its own. So it's kind of what you would have to read between the lines there is towns don't always get funded multiple years for the same type of grant.
I'm just thinking we can't get geared up to do too much here for a couple of years at least.
I would agree. Tracy Hall is probably not going to be within the next year as far as applying for anything.
Right.
And we're trying to knock out our funding soon. So we have basically our grant path cleared to essentially have our funding completely secured. So hopefully we can be done, and then there's a break and the town could apply if it's a feasible grant for the town at that point. There'd be a gap.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, would someone like to make a motion?
Move to support the Norwich Community Collaborative's intent to apply for a future implementation grant from the Vermont Community Development Program.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All right, any other questions, comments, discussion? Seeing none. Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Marcia?
Yes.
Priscilla?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. It's unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for coming, Jeff. Okay. The next item on the agenda is the town clerk's request to expend reserve funds. I know Lily is busy this evening. I don't see her back on.
She is there.
I'm here. There she is. There she is. Okay. All right. So you have your request, Lily. Do you want to add anything to this before we move forward?
I got 3 quotes for the scanner that we decided would be the best fit for what we need to do. And I am hopeful that I can use the $20,000 allotted in the budget last year, along with an additional $20,000-ish to purchase a really, really fancy scanner.
Yeah, it really is.
Does anyone have any questions for Lily?
Lily, can you just remind us, this is for scanning really old documents, not necessarily deeds?
Yep. So we are embarking on a project to basically scan everything we've got in the vault at this point. And the reason we picked the very, very expensive scanner is that we can actually scan our oldest record books. They're too thick and too large for us to scan with the scanner that was only $20,000. So this will allow us to get through everything we have in the vault, including the maps, and get that all up in the cloud so that researchers no longer have to touch the books. And that should, in theory, save us some money on having those books conserved.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, I'd like to make a motion.
Move to authorize expenditure of $40,250 for the purchase of a Bookeye 5V1A professional large format scanner for the town clerk's office. Funding will be as follows: $20,000 from fund number 19, town clerk equipment fund, and $20,250 from fund number 45, records restoration fund.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any further comments or discussion before we vote?
I have
Seeing none.
just one question. If I can.
Sorry, I didn't see your hand. Go ahead.
That's okay. So I recognize that this is for the town clerk's office, and it's from reserve funds that are, of that ilk. I guess I'm just interested in like wider usage for rest of the town? What would that look like? And how does it work for members of the public, right? It's very fancy, but there's also one in the lobby of Dartmouth, right? It's in a public space, right, as well. So yeah, what does that look like, I guess?
Lily, you want to go ahead and answer that question?
I would encourage other departments within the town to make use of this scanner, especially the planning department, because they've got some stuff I think that could benefit from scanning. I would love to be able to open this up to the town at large. I know other towns have hosted like scanning days where people can come and bring their heirlooms and scan them, and I think that's a great thing to do. I want to get my head around using it, and then I will be happy to work on training other people or supervising their use of that scanner.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, yeah, given its cost, I would want someone to oversee any scanning done on it. Any other comments before we move on? Okay, seeing none. Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Marcia? Yes. Priscilla?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, unanimous. Okay, there you go, Lily. You're all set. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to number 7, Mascoma Bank CD renewal. And we have some information in the packet from the treasurer about CD terms and rates. So at the bottom, we see that the town manager and the finance director have proposed that we remove the accrued interest and invest 1 million in a 3-month term and 1 million in a 9-month term. So, Brennan, did you want to add anything to that?
Well, the reason we would keep the shorter term for one of those allocations is that we are anticipating reimbursement for the FEMA projects that are going to be starting at some point, probably early to midsummer is our estimation. So we had talked about that in a prior meeting, that we wanted to have some liquid cash so that we could pay out contractor invoices, and then it's a reimbursement process from the state, basically, with the FEMA funds. So I think this makes a lot of sense to put half of it into a longer term and half of it into a shorter term. And again, in 3 months, we'll have a better handle on exactly the timing of when we're going to need that cash.
Okay. All right. Any other questions, Marcia?
So I'm just wondering, it doesn't specify on here, but I assume we're talking Mascoma. And I look today, Ledyard is higher for both of those kinds of terms. So I'm just wondering, why aren't we considering Ledyard?
I guess we should ask the treasurer why the recommendation is for Mascoma.
So the rates that you're looking at, Marcia, are for people. They're not for municipalities. And the amount of money that we would put into Ledyard exceeds collateralization protection. And so we need to go into a CEDARS program, and I've reached out to Ledyard many times for quotes on a CEDARS product, and they have either chosen not to give us a rate or commit to something, and would want more of a relationship. So these particular CDs are in a certificate of deposit registry service, and they place the funds. We place it through Mascoma, but the service spreads the money out so that no one bank has more than $250,000 placed at the bank. So it's a whole service that takes care of the placement of the CDs. And those rates they vary by bank, but that's the reason the rates that you're looking at are not available for this.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, would someone like to make a motion? And I would just add that we should say that this would be placed at Mascoma Bank in the motion. I did not put that in there, but it should be added. So would someone like to make the motion?
Yeah, I'll do it. I move to reinvest $1 million in a CD at Mascoma Bank with a 3-month term at 3.93% APR. And also at Mascoma Bank, $1 million in a CD with a 9-month term at 3.69% APR, and to move all CD interests accrued to date to the general fund.
All right, thank you. Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Marcia?
Yes.
Priscilla?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay, thank you, Cheryl. All right, the next item is fire department request for fire equipment fund expenditures. And again, we have something in our packet from fire chief. Does anyone have any questions on this item? Or Brendan, did you want to offer?
I see Chief Northern is in the meeting, but I don't know that I have anything more to offer that wasn't in the memo. I thought it was pretty concise.
All right, does anyone have any questions for the chief? I don't see any. Would someone like to make a motion?
I move to authorize the expenditure of an amount not to exceed $21,757.12 from Fund Number 26 Fire Equipment Fund for the purchase of equipment as requested on February 12th, 2025.
All right, thank you. Is that? Thank you, Marcia. Okay, any further discussion? Seeing none. Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Marcia?
Yes.
Priscilla?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, unanimous. Okay, Chief, thank you for coming.
Thank you, folks. Appreciate it.
Yep, have a good evening.
You too.
Okay, number 9, public safety facility cleaning contract. Brendan, did you want to give us a little background on why this is here?
Sure. So it's here because we've kind of had a practice of all contracts that are going to be, a year long or longer would go to the select board for review and approval. I see Chief Romei is also still here, so he might have more insight into the actual vendors. But basically the former cleaning service, I believe, retired and went out of business. So the public facility building has not had cleaning service for a couple months now. And that was able to issue an RFP. Got 2 responses, of which he has made a recommendation. And I think everything else is probably in his memo more precisely than I'll explain it. We're basically just looking to re-engage a cleaning service for the building.
Does anyone have any questions? Priscilla?
I have had brain fog because I've been sick for 2 weeks, but I can't make the numbers add up. So I'm really a little confused. I mean, I recognize that these are unsophisticated proposals, I guess you might say. But like Green Meadows said $255 per week and $100 for deep cleaning. They say it totals $355. But I say, okay, $255 for 4 weeks isn't quite a month. And then I add the $100 and get to a month, and I come out to a total that's somewhere over, it's not $14,460. I'm just, and then I looked at the performance one, it says $139 a week and $149 monthly cleaning, and then they have a monthly total of $751.33, and that to me comes out times 12 months is $9,015.96, which doesn't, so please somebody straighten me out.
Okay, I can do that.
Thank you.
The monthly deep clean it's a weekly cleaning, but they're doing extra. So you have 40 weeks at $139.
Oh.
And then you have 12 weeks at $149, which totals $73.48.
Thank you.
I had a couple of questions myself. Marcia?
So a couple of questions. The first one, I think, Chief, you said that something wasn't offered that was sought in the RFP. So I was wondering what that was. And then The indemnity clause on the PJS contract on page 69 is of the packet is a little broad, especially as to breach of warranty under the agreement. I'm thinking of confidentiality issues and even the proximity of evidence and weapons potentially. So I'm just wondering if council has seen this or should they see it? So 2 questions.
Chief, do you have an answer for Marcia?
Sorry, I lost my Zoom window for a moment. I was just looking to see what you were seeing that they.
The indemnity clause is not.
Okay, so the indemnity clause. So I would just say that we have taken proactive steps in the last year to better wall off and secure critical spaces within our facility and to improve our storage of critical items within our facility that they would not have access into that space. When I talk about things that were missed in the RFP, they did not provide Performance did not provide an insurance certificate. They were both proposals were missing some minor technical things that, and Performances said they would gladly provide us an insurance certificate before they start.
Thank you. Marcia?
So just to follow up on the indemnity, it seems to kind of hold them harmless for things that they might do. That's what worries me.
Is it standard?
Well, the agreement that is being proposed is their agreement. So I would imagine that is probably their standard, but
Not the
it
industry.
would be up to us to agree that we would ask them to change that or not, I guess.
I guess that's why I just wondered if maybe we should run it past council to see, there might be a little bit of a negotiation there because I don't like anything that says somebody's got no liability.
Well, I would note if I might, it continues on to the next page where gross negligence or willful misconduct is not indemnified. So I don't know if that mitigates that concern or not.
I don't see that one.
Top of page 5.
No party should be required to indemnify the other. Yeah, that's just a little bit different. We don't have to indemnify if they do something terrible with a weapon that they steal, but they're not liable. So I'm just a little bit worried about that one.
Okay, any other questions or comments? I had a couple of questions. It was not clear to me as I tried to write the motion for this, when this contract would begin or this service would begin, and what is the period of time that we're signing for? Is it 1 year? Is it 3 years? What?
So I believe this would start probably immediately, like if we agree to this tonight and sign it, I think Chief would like to have them start on March 1st. And then there's a 30-day kind of opt-out for either party. So I think it would be not necessarily limited to a year. It would be ongoing until we decided to part ways with them or they decided to part ways with the town. Or we could put in, I would say maybe 1 year, then we have to do this again in 1 year. So maybe a longer term.
But if you're looking at this kind of automatically renews, what happens to their pricing? We don't have anything in here that
I think they're held at their pricing until they renegotiate a contract. So it's probably, as prices don't seem to go down these days, maybe beneficial to the town to lock them in at the price that they're quoting today.
So further to your comment, Brennan, about the 30 days, is that for cause or no cause?
I think that's just at will.
So we could sign this tonight if we wanted to have council look at it. And then if there was a problem.
I'd rather not do that.
Yeah, I know.
I'd rather if the majority of the board is not comfortable with the contract, I'd rather hash that out and then move forward with it, then sign something and then pull it back. with a cancel.
Where's the 30 days
Yeah.
in here? I'm not
I don't
spotting
see
that.
Matt, I think I had asked you that and I don't have it in front of me. Do you?
It's page 4 under amendments. Right above the indemnity paragraph.
All right, I see it. Yeah, thank you. Okay. All right.
I just wanted to say, in reference to Marcia's uneasiness, I feel reassured by what the chief said about controlling, for instance, evidence, I'm sure it's locked away pretty securely, and just controlling space. So I'm reassured by that in terms of risk. So I'd be okay with not running it by council. I just think about when our police department was in a ranch house where there's some evidence there and there's evidence there, and you get people that are, in a domestic dispute, hopefully you can get them in opposite corners. So we've come a long way in being able to control people's privacy and also evidence and, and having the police control their space. So I think we'll be good.
Okay. I see Cheryl's hand is up. Cheryl, go ahead. You can mute it.
So I just am curious about the need for a separate cleaning for the building there when we don't have something like that for Tracy Hall. And is there insufficient staff that we don't have for the town to do the cleaning that's needing to be done? I just don't understand the need for the separate cleaning contract when we have, I believe we have custodians. So I was going to ask the question of the need for this separate expense.
All right, thank you.
Well, we have a building custodian, Ben, who is busy with Tracy Hall most of the time. He has done some service over at the public safety building. I think this is needed. This is not a frivolous expense. It's something that they've had historically as far as a service that comes in and keeps their office looking professional.
Do we still have an opening for a buildings and grounds person?
No, that is filled.
Okay, and that person wouldn't be available to do this kind of thing. Okay. All right, Marcia?
So I agree. I mean, I think literally there could be blood on the floor in the police station. We need to have a good service. I'd like to ask the town manager, do you have any worries about this indemnity clause?
I don't think I do.
Okay.
All right, any other questions?
Just one comment, which is this is a contracted service. We have contracted services for plows. So I suspect that the board would like this contracted service. And so, just tracking our consistencies, that contracted services are an important supplement to our hardworking A-line staff.
Okay, thank you. All right. So if you look at the motion that I proposed, I'm still not clear on what to do on the term of the contract.
So if I may,
Yes.
I've been reading the motion. I think you could just take out the to sign, take out the and a 1 year and just to sign a contract with Performance Janitorial Services commencing March 1st. I think is the chief. Is that right? You're looking to get them going as soon as you can.
So he's on mute.
Sorry, they're actually pre-scheduled to come in tomorrow and start working on checklist development, assuming things go well tonight.
Okay. Oh. So we'd be looking at starting February 27 is what you're saying, or immediately.
I think March 1st is fine, just to keep it round numbers. They just wanted to get a jump on developing the checklists and standards.
Oh, I see.
Of course.
Putting together a punch list. Okay. All right, Roger, go ahead.
Pam, we don't actually have to make a motion because we have a purchasing policy that makes this the prerogative of the town manager. So I'm not sure how much I even want. It's reminding me that I need to clean my own house. It's not giving, this is not the good use of the town taxpayers' time.
I did bring up that point with the town manager and he said he would like to bring it to the board. So here we are.
If we have an organizational meeting next week, if we want to take this smaller contracts out of the board's purview, I'm happy to do that because this is really pretty straightforward and we just spent half an hour on it. But we have a precedent, which I've tried to follow, of contracts go to the select board for their approval, whether
I
they're.
think we're comparing interim town manager to town manager. And,
We've done
you know,
this
we
in the
were
last
looking at-
year, at least every time. So again, with the new board sitting, if we want to change how we handle our process, that's fine by me and agreeable. I just, the reason it's here tonight is because it was a contract and every other contract we've had this year has been approved and reviewed by the select board.
Well, but some contracts do need to be reviewed by the select board and some do not. And this is the policy.
Let's have a board make that definition.
There's the $10,000.
There's a policy.
Right, I agree. Mary?
I think we should have a one-year contract because it corresponds to the amount being requested.
Or else take out the amount.
Or, well,
because we've got a contract.
oh, we could just not do this. I don't know.
Let's
It's like
be
final words.
consistent. Let's be consistent because we have been doing it. Next week is next week and the world can change.
We did not do the contract with bill you for the listers. We said that that was within the purview of the town manager. That's why I questioned whether this should come to the board because it's under 10,000. And so there's some confusion as to what the board expects and what is the town manager understands. So I would be perfectly comfortable leaving this under the purview of the town manager and the $10,000 limit that is set in the finance policy. What is the pleasure of the board?
I like that idea.
I'm going to pull the board. Marcia, do you feel this is something that the board should vote?
I will defer to Brennan. I just don't, we've done this before.
Yeah, I would be happy to go back 20 minutes in all of our lives and say, well, Brennan, this is under $10,000. Any contract you want to sign is in your purview. Again, that has not been my understanding from past practice. So there's.
But that is what I said during our agenda setting.
But again, if I go forward with this and then I get called to the rug for having done something inappropriate, I'd rather be more consistent and conservative with this board. So that's where we are. I don't care if the board doesn't want to take this up. I will certainly act on it tomorrow with the chief in my discretion as the town manager.
I am going to answer, it's here and we should just move it.
All right, Mary, how do you feel?
Change it next week.
This is like the last meeting of this board. Ugly way to end. Lack of
Still got a couple of
consistency.
things.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think that we should have a more consistent policy going forward, I think. So it's not confusing for our town manager. And if we stick with that policy, then we would not deal with this tonight. So I'm going to say, let's not do it.
It's in the master financial policy. Anything under 10,000 can be signed by the
Right,
town.
and just moving forward, try to be like consistent so that we're not pulling the rug out.
Right.
So I'd say no.
Okay,
I'd say don't make a motion, let the town manager take care of it, it's under 10,000.
all right. And Roger, I think was your position that this is within the town manager's purview that shouldn't be here tonight?
Yes,
Is that correct?
but I also recognize why Brennan feels like he needs to exercise this caution, and I'm sad for that. But it's a new era soon.
Are you a yes or a no?
I am a no.
Right, and I am a no. So shall we move on?
Can I make another motion?
I guess so. Okay,
I move to follow the financial policy and allow the town manager to sign the contract for the public safety cleaning contract.
I'll second it. So crafty, so crafty.
okay, so Marcia has made the motion and Roger has seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Mary, how do you vote?
Yes.
Marcia?
Yes.
Priscilla?
Yep, fine.
Roger?
Yes, yes.
And I'm a yes, unanimous.
All right.
Okay,
You.
all right.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Chief.
Yeah. Thank you, Chief.
Thanks for your perseverance. Okay, all right, now we can move on to number 10, the construction inspection services recommendation for FEMA projects. And again, this is in our packet from the DPW director. Brennan, you want to speak to this?
I think, again, the memo probably is pretty concise and speaks for itself. This was recommending Du Bois and King for the inspection services for the project.
And what does that mean?
So they are going to be basically on staff and functioning in kind of a resident engineer for the projects.
So this is kind of like a clerk of the works
You could look at,
where they would oversee and make sure things are done according
Correct.
to.
they are the engineering expert that is making sure everything's done correctly.
Okay, all right. Are there any questions, comments? Seeing none, would someone like to make a motion?
I move to authorize the town manager to sign a contract with Du Bois and King, Inc. in the amount of $51,600 for construction inspection services for the Hemlock Road slope stabilization and culvert replacement projects on Ilsley, Cape Wallace, and Norfolk Lake roads. Funds will be temporarily paid for from account number 01-5-703703 until reimbursement is received from federal and state FEMA agencies.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you.
And this is
Okay,
a contract that needs our authorization because it's more.
Yes, it's definitely over 10,000.
There you
Yes. Okay, any further discussion? Seeing none, Mary, how do you vote?
Yes.
Marcia?
Yes.
Priscilla?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
And I am going to say no, because I am still concerned about whether FEMA funds will be available. And I would like that reflected in the minutes. Okay, next item, finalize informational hearing presentation.
Can I make you a co-host again?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so Brendan has given us updated slides in our packet. I'm just going to share her screen to put these slides up for us.
So just to cue this up, if I may. So most of these slides remain pretty much the same as they were at the last meeting. I might have made a couple little grammatical changes based on the input I had. And again, if we just want to walk through maybe slide by slide, make sure everybody is good.
I don't see a need to do that, but if others disagree, I'm happy to go through.
Could I wasn't here for the previous
Oh, that's
discussion,
right. I'm
so
sorry, Priscilla.
if it's
Sure.
okay, I just a couple of. And,
All right.
I just go.
Yes, I'd forgotten that you were not here last time. so
Okay.
go ahead.
This is really nitpicky. Current staff town departments, we get down to police department crossing guard. Did Chemo sign on to be the crossing guard?
He did, but this was written a week ago.
I mean, should we put Chemo in there or not? I mean, I don't know.
We could at this point. Chemo accepted the position. I know it was, so we have actually a couple things that are changing here, I guess. That would be one. I think I've just listed Brendan and said one open.
Yeah.
It's actually Chemo and Chemo's wife, I think, are gonna do dual.
Abby's gonna do it too?
So we could put their names down if we'd like to, sure.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
what would you say, chemo groups and then alternate would?
Well, they're only gonna be a half person each, right? So we'll have to figure out, they'll have to decide who gets the shift on the rainy days and sunny
Is
days.
she your alternate? She's gonna only be there when you can't be for some reason, or?
Yeah. Or when Brendan might not be available. So
So she's
we'll
an
have
alternate.
3 people basically in a rotation with Brendan having
Okay.
seniority.
All right, any other questions?
I had, wow. Yeah, this is me being the skunk at the garden party again. I don't know why we bothered to talk about the tax rate. Because it's something people can get excited about. We don't have the grand list yet. And what people really care about is the amount of dollars they're expected to pay. But, you know, if you guys want to talk about the tax rate, Brennan gets to present that.
So there was extensive discussion last meeting for
I mean, I was event, you know.
about how to try to present what most people are coming to the meeting to find out without being able to give them a definitive rate based on the reappraisal. So what we've done here, if everything is good up to here, right, up to slide
Exploring the tax rate
at this point. So we have 2 options. The
Yes.
first option slide is basically exactly what we had in the last meeting. And then the option 2, which is the next slide, is a little more detailed.
Yeah.
And tries a little bit to answer questions before they
Okay.
get asked. And it was actually Mary who volunteered to explain why we don't know what the tax rate is to the populace. But if she has changed her mind, I will do it. Again, I think the more upfront we are with folks who will get a chance to see this slide deck in the packet or wherever, it's probably going to save headaches and strife in the public meeting.
And it looks like there's a choice too, right?
So yes, the question for the slide deck would be, do we want option 2 with the more detail and is all of that copy making sense to people? Or do we want option 1, just kind of the bare bones? It's really up to you guys.
I like 2.
I feel like you should give as little information as you can and answer questions if they come up. But that's just my personal preference. So maybe what we should do is poll the board and see which option we prefer. So Marcia, you said option 1 is your preference?
I said option 2.
Oh, I'm sorry, option 2. Okay. Mary, what's your preference?
I could do 2, since maybe you'll have to present it. It's a little bit of a seminar. I think both of them explain the process fine. 2 gives a little historical context. But also I tend to kind of be in Pam's camp about keeping it pretty simple unless the question is asked. So I'm going to go for 1.
Okay. Priscilla?
Since Mary's willing to present, I'm going to go with what she wants to do, and that's 1.
Just to be clear, I don't think it makes sense for Mary to hop into this slide. I will present all the slides.
She'll answer questions.
This is my understanding, Mary. I might have misunderstood. Was this will be a question that's going to come up. If we want to address it, preemptively and say before 10 people ask, what is the tax rate? You could explain, or I could explain that again, based on the slide that you just saw, we don't know that information right now. And we aren't going to have a set tax rate until we get to July, when we have our grand list lodged and all of those variables are known.
So would you just want to call on me and say something?
Or how about we wait till the first question gets asked?
Okay.
And then we say,
Right.
Mary would like to answer that.
I will
And
say
take
though,
slide 2 with you.
It's so funny. I mean, I think it's important to have a good slide deck and everything's true and organized. But boy, the way you present it makes a big difference,
Yeah.
because you're kind of doing it's not a sales job, but if you present with confidence, there are not going to be very many questions. Just saying.
Except the question of what happens with this reappraisal that everybody is aware is happening. You know, I think that's really the answer is, again, the purpose of the reappraisal is going to raise our grand list. It's going to lower the tax rate, but we don't know a definitive for each property because they might vary within that realm, and we don't really know what the final result is going to be. And unfortunately, that's what the town folks are going to have to go into the voting booth and vote on.
But that's an emotional question.
It is.
Because the rationality is right here,
Yeah.
but people still worry because it's fear of the unknown. I mean, maybe it'll be great. I don't know. It'll be kind of worrisome for some and not better for others.
Could be.
It could be.
Yeah,
So,
I just remember last meeting, we had at least one gentleman who was really adamant that he wanted to know the 4-digit tax rate. Like that was what he had come to the meeting to hear. And we're not going to be able to provide that at the meeting on Monday. And
I'll take that on. I mean,
it is.
I deal with children, okay?
It's a situation where I think most people are gonna be very understanding that, again, without the variables known, we really can't provide an accurate estimate and accept that. It's unfortunate.
All right, Roger, which option do you prefer, 1 or 2?
I'm fine with 2 because there's nothing inherently wrong with it. I think I think that a lot of how this is supposed to work is you're really explaining how these things are done, and you give a number and then you have many asterisks around it, right? And so this explanation is like effectively the asterisks. I don't understand why it has to be called exploring the tax, right? You have explored, you've explained maybe something. You've explained how tax rates are developed, but you have yet to really explore it. So I guess I take issue with the title, but option 2 is fine. Like my criticism is that exploring the tax rate is not exactly what you're doing with the slide, and also it is a slide of just text, but so be it.
Well, I'm going to say option 1. And the reason I think option 1 is better is because people can only digest so much that's up on a screen. So the less you put up there, the better. And then if Brennan wants to present the information that's into verbally and just explain, well, last year we put in 700,000 from the surplus and that helped reduce the tax burden, fine. But I think from a presentation standpoint, there's only so much people can manage to digest from what's up on the screen. So I would say option 1 would be my preference. Marcia?
I wanted to point out a couple other things, but just on that particular point, I would say from my sort of teaching, I have found the opposite, that people learn differently. Some people need to see things and hear it at the same time. And so I think that the more they can see and hear, they actually absorb better. But back on page 82, if I may, I was just wondering, under the police department, we have 1 open position and the punctuation would imply that it's still an officer, but because it's next to part-time officer, I wondered if we wanted to put in 1 officer, 1 open officer position, full-time or whatever. And then on 84, where is it? Under, where is it? Under select board goal for basically, I'm wondering about whether we need to point out that we're trying to budget for the current level of services. Because, you know, a lot of it has been said about that. So either amend the select board goal to add the words at the end without cutting services, or add a fourth challenge, maintain the current level of services. Because frankly, if we don't have this budget passed, then I think what we're going to have to do is come back as a board and discuss, okay, what can we cut? So I think making that clear up front maybe explains to people, the town has, the people who work for the town have actually done the work to make sure that they have gone to the bone as much as they can to get that 6% without cutting our services. But if we don't pass it, so I'm just suggesting those.
Okay, so just to recap, Marcia, what wording would you add?
Either after where it says select board goal up here, right? Generate a budget not to exceed a 6% increase over the current year in operational expenses, comma, without cutting services. Or if not there, we could put in a fourth challenge, which would be maintain the current level of services.
Okay. All right, well, let's go back to the option 1 and 2. I think we voted 3 for option 1, so we'll leave it there. And
May I just make that might be the case. As the presenter, I would much prefer option 2, if that matters to anyone.
It's okay with me. Why then it's really narrows an option. It's like, fine, if you're more comfortable with it.
Well, I think, again, my purpose in trying to craft the slide with Barry was to provide in bullet points, trying to make it fairly simple. So just a basic understanding of folks of how that tax rate is set, acknowledging that it's going to be a little bit higher this year because we don't have a surplus infusion in the revenue column. And then basically the explanation of why we don't know the tax rate today, which is the last 3 bullets there. So to me, this is the option that I would much prefer to have up there as the presenter and not have to read things into this that aren't visible.
I'm okay with that. Also, I think it's a nice lead into the next slide, which is the options presented for use of the surplus. It kind of reminds them that we're doing this a little differently this year.
It's right.
But on that slide, I was wondering if we could say that the 3 options presented for use of the $591,000 surplus, just put it up there. I mean, you could do the math pretty easily, but I mean, why not put it up there? Last year it was 700,000. This year it's 591. We have different ideas.
so you'd say 3 options presented for use of surplus funds.
Or just for use of $591,000 surplus. Just put the number.
For use of $591,000 surplus. Okay. All right. Got that, Brennan?
Is that the will of the board? I'm writing notes here, but I haven't heard any definitives. That's fine. I think we might have talked about, do we put the big number and then it breaks down into those 3 categories? I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
I'd support that too.
Okay.
And if you're going to use the second slide, it fits the narrative better, like the way you want to tell the story.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
So are we agreeing that he's going to present option 2, or explain the tax rate and then go into the surplus? As you said, there's kind of a segue from using the surplus last year to using the surplus this year.
Yeah.
Okay with me? Okay.
Okay, with me too.
And to Marcia's comment there, related to, I think I would, if we're going to do that, add the bullet under the challenges that we're trying to maintain the town's current level of services. I'm happy to just add a 4th bullet to that.
Okay. I have no issue with that. Roger, are you in agreement there? Make that a 4th bullet point to maintain the current level of services?
Yeah, and ultimately we're entrusting Brennan to present this, so he should do what he's comfortable with, right? So yeah.
All right, any other,
There was just one other thing, on the next one, the first page of the completed initiatives and ongoing work.
where are we?
The next page after the surplus stuff. There's just a little typo. You go down, select board approve, should be approved with a D, I think, an updated personnel policy.
Past tense.
Well, I was date, I think that was because it has a date associated with it. It was kind of chronological.
Everything, well,
It doesn't matter. I
the other
can
verbs are past tense.
certainly add a D.
Yeah. All right,
Okay.
any other comments by the board? Seeing none, Cheryl, you have a comment?
Yes, I wondered if we could put the full name of the reappraisal firm in the slide. It's KRT Appraisal.
Which slide are we on?
What is
I think it's under the elected official page. I believe it's under elected official page. It's KRT Appraisal.
Oh, contract, yeah.
KRT reappraisal services.
KRT Appraisal.
Appraisal.
I will check what they have on their
Okay.
invoices.
Good idea. Fair enough.
I can't remember if it's.
It's
KRT
what's on our, it's on our
appraisal.
website. It's on our website as well, but
Okay, all right.
thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, anything else? Cheryl, your hand's still up. I assume you don't have another question or comment. Okay,
Our town is
Um,
on their website. Fascinating. Anyway, sorry.
okay, so here we are. We've made some suggestions for some changes. Would someone like to make a motion? And I left this blank because I wasn't quite sure where we were gonna go with this.
Move to approve the informational hearing presentation as amended.
I'll second.
Okay. Okay, motion by Marcia, second by Mary. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Mary, how do you vote?
Oh, yes.
Marcia,
Yes.
Priscilla,
Yes.
Roger,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. Okay. All right. Next item, the town manager's report.
Right. So I will again kind of through some of this fairly quickly and just mention that the finance department audit report, as we know from the last meeting, is now completed for the year. We'll begin again in 3 short months or 4 short months, never ending cycle, but we're done for 2024. And I think everybody was pretty pleased with the results and the improvements and the progress being made in the finance department. And I just wanted to point out the hard work that Barry Rosalinda has been doing there. She's doing a really nice job. We did have our tax collection deadline a couple weeks ago on February 10th. So still working through the processing of that. And in unfortunate news, and I notified the board of this already, but Ashley Wooler has resigned her position as the staff accountant and is moved on to another career opportunity. And so we are currently interviewing for that position in the town. I will skip over to police department. I think I might have mentioned this at the last meeting that we had someone starting in early February, but we now have Officer Michael Rebentish, who is working with in our police department and has gotten through his initial waiver criteria. That was what we had discussed. It was needed so he can be an active patrol officer. So still doing some final kind of internal training, but we have him on board right now. And if you haven't met Michael, I'm sure reaching out to Chief Romei or Michelle as the administrative assistant to set up a time to meet him would work individually. And I imagine Matt is going to have some kind of a meet and greet at some point in the near future as well. People wanted to get to know him a little bit better. Moving on to the DPW, we did complete the last of the easement deeds for the FEMA culvert replacement. So that's nice to have that done. We are currently getting the final bids. We actually had a bid opening this afternoon for the Hemlock Road project and had three, we'll go into this in more detail in a future meeting, but we had three bidders for that. And then next Monday, the culvert replacement project construction bids are due. So we're hopeful to have at least a couple of vendors to choose from there. Again, we have confirmed to the best of our ability at the time that FEMA projects are proceeding as planned. And no one can foresee the future here, but that's what we're working off of. We also today signed a contract for the Beaver Meadow Road shoulder project. So we have our contractor in place, looking to have that ideally and weather permitting done by the end of June. Yeah, finally, right? Well, it takes time, but they tend to get done eventually. And again, I just mentioned that we've had a trying winter season so far as our snow removal. So I just ask people to be patient and courteous to our hardworking equipment operators and folks that are out there on the road.
I just wanted to note that last big storm, I don't know when any of the plow guys and gals got a chance to rest, because it seemed to me, because it kept snowing, that the plows were out like every couple of hours.
Yeah.
And that just went on and on and on and on. And it was like, okay, they didn't get to the sidewalks. They were probably taking a little bit of rest.
I have.
I mean, let's, they have to live. So I thought it was really, I thought they were working really hard.
Thanks. I'm sure they'll appreciate that. All right. As you might have seen, if you were facing this way, we have a fencing club that's come back to Norwich after a hiatus. So the young folks that were coming in and out in fencing attire, that was what was happening. So I think that's good news. Down to the town manager's office, as we saw, we are moving forward with the Studio Nexus report. The town report is available if folks haven't gotten their copies yet. I think they were put in everyone's mailbox with the bound copy.
Okay.
I think those are selling well so far. A bunch of them are going out, so it's good. Again, preparation for the March 3rd info meeting. That'll be nice to have that behind us. And right now we are soliciting for some open positions. I can announce some good news tonight in that we had an offer accepted for the administrative assistant position. So we have someone we're very hopeful is going to be a great fit, and she will be starting in the middle of March. So she's going to have a couple of weeks to give her notice to her current employer. And in keeping with our tradition of not announcing any names until they show up on the first day, I'm not gonna. And then we still have an equipment operator for DPW. We actually have reposted that as we do periodically, and have a couple candidates right now for interviews. So that's also good news. And as I mentioned earlier, we are interviewing for the staff accountant.
We still advertising for the open police officer?
Yes, that as well.
Okay, that's what. And
Yep.
Sorry to bring up a sore subject, but the relationship with the fire district.
Mhm.
I am I am the liaison with the board with the fire district, because I go to all their meetings. And it just doesn't seem to be quite the sense of urgency on the part of the town that the fire district feels to try to get this resolved. And this isn't the only bill from the fire district that's been sort of, oh, you sent us a bill. Okay, well, think about it. There's still the issue of the water hammer that ended up being what, $26,000. And traditionally the fire department did that with a training exercise or something the town paid for. And that, it seems disrespectful to me that the town and the select board and everybody, it just sort of brushing off the fire district. It is another municipality within this municipality. I mean, I feel like the guy in Ghostbusters, many millions of registered voters. Not exactly, it's Norwich, but but you know, I think it would be good to treat the fire district with a little more dispatch.
If I may respond. So I respect your opinion on this, and the perception that the town is not moving forward, I don't think is an accurate one, because we have been diligently trying to resolve the issues of the fire protection fee now for 9-10 months. It's probably almost a year at this point. And we have been back and forth with a couple of different iterations of what might work related to the current billing status. So we have a budgeted amount, and I think I'd be happy at this point to pay up to that budgeted amount. But we also have a $26,000 bill for these water hammer breaks that occurred this past fall, which we don't have any source for. And I think they need to be worked out concurrently. I think they go together at some level, because we have a certain amount of money for that obligated. So that's where we are. We did meet with them in January and left it as we were all gonna go do a little more research and be able to be a little better informed, and have not been invited back to another Prudential Committee meeting to have that discussion. So that's where it stands. And again, I don't perceive us as dragging our feet in any way. I just feel like we have a fiduciary obligation to do the right thing for all the townspeople, and we're trying to do that. So.
Well, I would just add to that sometimes expenses come up that aren't planned, but we still have to pay for them. You know, if somebody comes and tells you your roof needs to be replaced and you haven't budgeted for it, you have to figure out how to find the money to do it. And so on this hammering issue, if our fire department is breaking the fire mains or the water mains, and it's our obligation to pay for that, then I think we have to find the money somewhere.
So if I may, I don't believe that's what happened in this situation. So,
Okay.
so that's where our discussion lies.
I see. Okay,
Oh, can I make a comment on that, Brennan?
certainly. Go ahead, Roger.
So I know people like find it to be overwrought to engage legal counsel on matters that should be up to goodwill, but I think there's a lot of clarity that comes when you sort of engage in like a kind of mediation, like quasi lawyerly, process. When we did collective bargaining, for example, both representatives, both from the town and from the union, had people that they engaged to, work with. And, you could measure progress in that way, I'm not saying you need a collective bargaining process or something at the scale of like that for these kinds of, intermunicipal relationships, but I think you should, maybe there's some value in formalizing, some kind of process that actually looks to get, meetings on the calendar, and regularly interfaces and tracks progress and has ground rules for, the conversation. I think mediation or a legal process is where this should go if both parties feel like they want some more efficiency.
Okay, well, Roger, the issue is that they're saying they don't have money, and now you're talking about another expense to mediate the issue, and so I'm not sure that works.
If they can't resolve it and schedule meetings regularly and like have an understanding of process, then you unfortunately need to expend money on getting someone to make a process for you.
I'd rather just pay the bill.
Can we put this on an agenda item?
Should be, yeah, should be an agenda.
Because it's not on the agenda.
That's what I have to say to this, to Brennan's comment, to this conversation on the town manager's report, where I said that from the beginning, and I feel proven correct, but is my final day.
All right, Well, I can put it on the agenda for future meetings for the next select board to address. Happy to do that. Mary, you had a comment?
I think I just want to give our town manager some credit for reaching out and at least trying to resolve some of the questions with the fire district. And we all weren't in the meeting to actually know what happened. So we could please give him the benefit of the doubt, whether or not we need a mediator going forward or not. Just saying.
I agree. Well, I think if Brennan feels that mediation is
Yeah.
the only way to resolve the issue, he'll let the board know that. Okay, so is that everything you wanted to offer for?
I think that was it, yes.
Okay, all right, great, thank you. The next item on the agenda is the AP warrant we have in our packet. I would note that this is an unusually large amount because we have a payment to the school system in here.
Yeah.
In excess of $7 million. So, Priscilla?
Just another question. Wilder Dam relicensing. Huh?
Oh, we.
That's
What do we have to
that's
do?
a legal expense.
Yeah, well, I see it, so there's a lot.
We had agreed to collaborate with the 4 other surrounding towns.
Oh, okay.
And so.
Okay, I remember, okay, thank you, so remember that.
This is the firm everyone wanted to use.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, okay.
Yep.
All right, any other questions? If not, would someone like to make a motion?
I move to approve AP warrant number 1238 in the amount of $7,310,835.14 to be paid from the general fund.
Second. All right, thank you, Marcia. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Mary, how do you vote?
Yes.
Marcia? Yes. Priscilla?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. I have signed. Priscilla, if you would sign and pass that down.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Okay. The next item is correspondence. And we have a few pieces of correspondence here. We have a note from the treasurer asking us, or I'm sorry, from the listers asking us to sign the grand list for certifying no appeal or suit pending, which we did before the meeting tonight. So that's taken care of.
Pam,
Yes.
I looked up the date that I signed that document we were talking about. It was December.
What document? We
Kentucky litigation.
Okay.
I have that.
And this is as of December 31.
Okay, that's what I wanted to check.
Yep. That's why we do it in February, because we have to wait to see what's resolved as of December 31. Okay, all right, the next item is a correspondence from Robert Fiskin talking about winter snow plowing of the parcel 5 parking lot. Brendan, if you haven't already addressed this issue, I would think that this is something that you can.
Parking lot is plowed.
Perfect. Just exactly what I wanted to hear. Okay, and it'll be something that we attend to on a regular basis, I assume. Maybe it was just lack of understanding. And those were the only 2 pieces of correspondence that we had. Would someone like to make a motion?
I move to accept all correspondence.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All right, is there any discussion? Seeing none, Mary, how do you vote?
Yes.
Marcia?
Yes.
Priscilla?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, unanimous. Okay, the next item is approval of the February 12th minutes. And I did have one request in here. It was just to fix a typo on number 8. It should be fund number 32, not fund 2.
Yep, that's my typo. It was very generous to include me in approving the agenda, but I wasn't there.
Oh, I knew you would.
Yes, I would. It's true.
Oh, right. Thank you for catching that, Priscilla. Okay, so we have 2 small corrections. And then my request that I'd just be on the record as being concerned about FEMA funding. So it'll just stay as a memo in the packet. Any other comments or requests or corrections? Seeing none, would someone like to make a motion?
Who's my own?
Let's see, I move to approve the February 12th, 2025 minutes as amended. To correct a typo of
Fund 32.
Fund 32, and to note that Ursula Vincent was not present to approve
The agenda.
the agenda.
Second. Okay. Made by Mary, seconded by Marcia. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Marcia,
Oh, yes.
Priscilla?
I should abstain. I wasn't there.
Okay, Roger,
Yes.
and I'm yes, so 4 yes, 1 abstention.
Okay.
Okay, and then the last item, at the beginning of, oh, I'm sorry, department head reports. We have reports in here from finance, from the police department, from the rec department, and the fire department. Any comments or discussion on any of those?
Just wonder what motor vehicle complaints are. But we don't have to-
Speeding, maybe?
That's a complaint, maybe.
I don't know.
Well, I saw something happen on my road that might qualify, and that is that one of my neighbors has been parking right on the edge of the pavement, and it creates problems for snowplows. And the other day, I was happy to see our new police officer stop and have a chat with the homeowner, and they have since moved their cars further off the road. So that might be something that comes under motor vehicle. Just talking to a homeowner about not being on the paved part of the road. Mary?
Just one other comment on the police report, just noticing that there are troubles with substance abuse in our town. And thinking that, we were wondering what to do with opioid,
The settlement funds.
the opioid fund. So maybe with the next board, we could explore that with the police chief. I also was, just reading over the town report and remembering that the headrest does a lot with people in recovery. So, just that we shouldn't let that ball drop. I think there might be some appropriate ways to spend those funds.
Yeah, and I tried to explore that with the auditor, and I didn't feel like I got a good, clear answer on whether this was something that needed to go to the voters as a warrant, or if this was something that the select board could set up as some kind of a special revenue fund.
I see.
And I didn't feel like I got a clear answer on that.
Okay, well, there's another issue. Yeah.
Yeah, so how we create a fund to address these issues is
Also
the
important.
first question that needs to be answered, and then from there, whether the board wants to
Right.
move in that direction.
Thank you.
Priscilla?
Is this, does this constitute the finance department's report, this budget status report? Because I have
Yes.
just a couple of comments. When I look at the revenue, which is the beginning part of it, there's some big differences between what we thought, what we budgeted, and what the actual has been year to date through period 7. For instance, hold harmless, we thought was going to be about $15,000, and it's actually $247,000, which is a lot. Bank interest we budgeted 20, and it's already almost 110,000. Then the opioid settlement, we thought 3, and it's, almost 15. And this makes me wonder if we're getting so much more money on the revenue side than we expected we were getting, and we're not through the year. It just makes me wonder if, sorry, everybody, if we're asking the taxpayers for too much money in the budget.
Well, I can answer a couple of your questions. The $15,495 is typically the money that the town gets for reappraisal from the state. and I'm not sure why it's in that category. The hold harmless money from the state is supposed to be the money that we get to cover the discount that homeowners in current use receive. So they get a reduced tax bill because they put their land in current use.
Okay.
And then it's always a year behind, but the next year, the state sends us a check saying, well, you billed your current use owners less money, and so we're giving you this payment to help offset the discounts that those owners receive. So that is the hold harmless, because I looked into that. I was curious as to what's being held harmless, and we're being held harmless in the current use rates that.
But it's so much more than we expected.
We didn't actually budget an amount for current use.
Well, it
Maybe
says,
we should have.
well, it's, I don't know, it says budget $15,495.
Right, but that budget is the amount that we typically get for reappraisal. It's like $8.50.
We just happen to get 246.
And there doesn't appear to be anything in the budget for the current use money that we get each year.
Okay.
And what was your other, the
Bank interest.
The interest is, Cheryl has been doing a wonderful job of making recommendations to put money in CDs, and we've been having a lot more
That's great.
interest than,
I mean, it's a good problem.
yeah. I see Barry is here. I don't know if Barry wants to address.
I think you just answered Priscilla's questions, but I think our procedure has been to put any of the questions into writing if you have them and they aren't answered, and then Barry has a chance not to try to answer them on the fly. And then they can go into the next board packet. That's what we've done in the past.
All right, maybe Barry can let us know if my explanation is correct, that the $15,495 is the reappraisal money, and that we didn't budget for the current use income that we typically get from the state. We do get a payment every year. Any other questions or discussion on these reports? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the item that we added, which was the organizational meeting agenda for March 5th. I did print out the agenda that Marcia put together last year for the organizational meeting. And it's basically just electing officers, the chair, the vice chair, reviewing the agenda, setting the town newspaper, the meeting schedule, authorizing the chair or vice chair to sign payroll warrants, AP warrants off cycle, adopt procedure for receipt of correspondence, adopt rules of procedure, any or other organizational business, if any, and town meeting results.
Rules of procedure, did you list that?
Yes, 9 is adopt rules of procedure.
Plus public.
So I'm happy to draft something to give to Brennan if they can post on Monday, or whatever the board would like to do. I'm still a board member until Tuesday night, I guess. So I could do this on Monday. I'm happy to do it.
I think it's pretty formalized.
Yeah.
There's only so much that can happen.
Just take this and update it for the date, and
I'd be okay with that, but maybe Brennan has a question.
No, that's kind of what I was looking for. This is, I think, kind of our standard. These are the things that we do in an organization.
I think I still have the agenda. You can just take it.
Okay, well, if Pam wants to put it out and get it approved by the board, then we'll post it Monday. Give us 48 hours. And then the other question, I guess, is 6:30, the time that we would normally hold a meeting. Is that we should just stick with 6:30?
It's okay with me.
You going forward?
No, this is just for the organization. Doesn't usually
it's a
have.
special meeting, so you can set it anytime you want.
Well, I was hoping to go to a 7 o'clock Ash Wednesday service that evening. But I can go get the ashes to go in the morning.
Ashes to go.
Yeah. Jonathan Haas stands up front.
Maybe for simplicity, we'll just leave it at standard time,
Chemo.
unless other people have.
You're invited to the party, so 6:30.
Well, next Wednesday.
March 5th, the organizational meeting, and all new board members, along with the board members who are not up for reelection, attend, and you vote your chair, your vice chair, and your other items. Okay, all right.
Make sure you're sworn in.
Yes.
Usually Lily's there, you know, and you can just go and.
Well, sometimes she's there Tuesday night, the end of the election.
Yeah, that's the best.
Yeah, if you hang out.
She'll,
You're assuming a lot.
Well, we're assuming you're gonna step up, you know, come on now. There's
You're unopposed. I think it's a sure thing.
So Pam, you'll just use the existing agenda, send it out Monday morning, get it approved, and it'll go into the
why
post.
can't we approve it right now? It's not on the
I
agenda.
think we've approved it.
Okay.
Just gonna go with the standard.
Yep.
There's no need to change anything other than the date. And I will get that to you so that you can get it posted.
Right, just a request, if we could have the current rules for correspondence and procedure.
In a packet,
Mini packet.
Okay,
current rules for policy and procedure.
Roger, did you have a comment?
I think so. Most of that's already on the website already, but I would say that your calendar is probably the most important thing. Like when,
Calendar, yeah.
and
Good
if someone would even go ahead as to like pre-look at the calendar and say like, hey, let's not do that Thanksgiving week one, or like, hey,
That's the big
And,
one.
and look at when Christmas falls.
Yeah,
This year it was on a Wednesday that we would normally meet, so we had to make that adjustment. So yeah, okay.
Don't forget to put in public comments.
right.
Let me. Yeah, that's not on there, is it?
Oops.
Okay, I've made that notation, thank you. Okay. All right,
although
I
you
think
don't
we,
actually have to have a public comment as its own agenda item because but never mind. I'm not going to get into
I always just put one
Right,
because I didn't forget it that way.
I will add it to the list of items for the agenda. Okay, I think we've covered everything. It's 9:07.
Can I move to adjourn the meeting?
Please do. Second. All right, so motion by Priscilla, second by Marcia. Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Marcia? Yes. Priscilla?
Yes.
Roger?
yes.
And I'm a yes. We are adjourned.